And by the way, if the fireplace is making too much noise, let me know and I'll just mute myself.
All right, I will read the statement regarding Zoom meetings on June 16th, 2021. Governor Baker signed into law an act extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency. This act includes an extension until April 1st, 2022 of the remote meeting law provisions of his March 12th, 2020 executive order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law. This is an entirely remote meeting of the Finance Committee.
Okay, thank you very much, Bill. Good evening. We'll start the meeting with a roll call. George?
Here.
Robert?
Yeah.
Nate?
Here.
I'm here as well. Jack is unfortunately unable to attend, and Brian is on medical leave. All right, first item of business is reviewing the draft warrant, which members should have gotten an updated copy, I think yesterday afternoon. I confess I have not, I printed out one and I didn't want to waste more trees. So I'm just going to rely on Bill to kind of point out where there might be some differences. And I'm going to turn it over to Bill.
Yeah, let me make sure. What is the date on the bottom of your first page?
February 4th. That's
All
the
right,
one I have for the older one. I know it's older.
I've got a February 7th one. But let me go through it, and then if it's not the most recent because it's been pushed out a few times since I sent you that, we'll update you as to some of the issues. What we want to do here is, I mean, we have a distinct advantage in that Bob was clear he wanted complete language to begin this process. So typically it is a list, and then we try to talk our way into articles, and then we come out then doing the language. And I think the original intent with the list was, why waste your time on the articles? But what we're finding is by having the article language, the dialogue is much more informed. So by doing this, we can go through what we've already heard from the departments. I mean, it's a good sequence, and then make comment on those. And then what that does for me is it gives me the ability to sort of write a more complete report for you. So moving forward, I know I have to change the names on the Finance Committee report to some extent. This is typical stuff, and I will share the screen. Right now, I'm realizing I'm looking at myself. So,
Bill, let me just interrupt you. Is anyone else kind of straining to hear Bill at all? Might just be my speakers.
No, I hear him great.
Okay, it's just me. I'll just lean closer.
Make sure there's nobody in the waiting room. Okay. So what we've got is the annual town meeting warrant should be up on your screen. And the first one is the typical snow and ice and sort of funds that are need to be taken from free cash to cover overages associated with those accounts. It's a typical first article that you've seen: construction, demolition, snow and ice coming out of free cash, and those numbers usually come just before a town meeting. Any questions on this one?
Just any sense, Bill, of where we are? I mean, we've had what, 2 storms at this point?
I don't know. I know we're planning on coming in for something, but I'm not sure what that number is. As I said, given we're still facing them, and April 26th is the town meeting, it's most likely to come in later. But that's a good point. What I'll do is for your next meeting, find out where we are on Article 1 in terms of the amounts.
Yeah, it would just be helpful to have a ballpark and not get any kind of sticker shock.
Article 2, and this is the actual budget. Some of the things you've seen in your sheets. And this is the FinCom recommendation is preliminary. Obviously, you haven't made your recommendation, but it's just to fill out the sheet. These are the same numbers, or pretty much the same numbers you have in your sheets and you've heard from the departments. I'm going to go through each department, and some of the comments you made at the other meetings, if you want to bring them up again in terms of your concerns, like There's a comment on a need for a revolving fund, which you'll see in a later article for recreation, but if you want to make those again, I can sort of make notes against the departments as we scroll through.
Yeah, and I would just say, Bill, if you can just, I know as we went through each department, you would send ahead of time if there were updated changes from our budget books. But if there have been any updated changes since then, if you could point out what those are, I think that would be helpful to the committee.
Yeah, I'll have to, I'm not sure on all of them exactly, but updated changes is a question. I think this
Yeah,
meeting is,
or any major ones, like if it's
Yeah.
like $500, then, personally, I don't care, but if it's a major increase of tens of thousands, I think we would be interested.
yeah, I haven't seen any of those. Where you're gonna see changes is you're gonna actually see the capital show up in the warrant articles. So the capital appears in the warrant articles, which is a good chance to see what is planned to be funded. So there's a moderator and a selectman. Any questions on that? Not a scroll very slowly to town administrator. Any questions on that? Again, the actual budget and then requests are the first three columns. So you can get to see any patterns in each of these, and if anybody picks up on any of those, they're pretty much similar moving down the cycle there with some changes in Medicare, not too much in health insurance, a little bit in pension and general insurance. So not a lot of big jumps in these numbers. If no questions, I'll move to Finance Committee. The request in fiscal year 23 is to put the reserve back, which is available to the Finance Committee for any contingencies. If you remember, Bob mentioned that it was not funded in prior budgets. So central purchasing, if nothing in Finance Committee, central purchasing, not a lot of changes. Again, most of these budgets are close to level funded unless there's a union contract or other obligation that needs to be done. Municipal finance, town accountant. And the advantage here is these are near complete in terms of they're most likely not going to change. So it's a good opportunity. If you see an anomaly, give me the sort of line number and a question, and I'll ask that as we move forward. So 360, again, it is actual budget and then request. So the first column is actual and it's a request, is a budget request, a little bit of jump there, and assessors. Not a lot of jumps across the board in this one. Some jump in collector treasurer. Town clerk, and this is the last one you saw, these departments, the finance departments. Community development. One of the things here you'll see later is a request for funding for the local comprehensive plan. But that is not in the budget, that's in a separate request.
Yeah, if I might, Bill, I guess just for the purposes of kind of expediency and making sure there is good feedback here. Does the committee feel like we need to go over this again, given that we have already kind of gone over it and given preliminary approval? I mean, for me, it just, without seeing if there's any, knowing if there's any differences, I mean, I haven't gone line by line comparing that to what we've been presented with, but it might feel a little repetitive to some, but I defer to the committee to see what their thoughts are.
I agree. It's, yeah.
All right. We can go to the rest of the warrant articles if you want to skip the budget. I'm not aware of any major changes in the budget. If there are, I will with Bob to get those to you from what you have in your books to what you were sent. So moving
Yeah, that's what I
forward-
would just say is like if we can have that before the next meeting, identifying what, if any, major changes that there are. And then, we could go back and look at it again in more detail, but given that the committee has already given preliminary approval for all of these items, I don't.
All right, so
we need to do it.
this is golf capital. It represents expenditures from retained earnings. So, well, this is a golf budget, I'm sorry. And then this would be water's budget, and moving ahead into capitals, septage enterprise. So just explaining this to you so that you understand and quickly each one of them. Wastewater, so you're going to see those sort of, first article is all the things we're covering like snow and ice. The second one is the operating budget levy, and then these series of articles, Bob has grouped them by other funds, enterprise funds like that. So this whole first part is the various funding. So moving forward, and school budgets are still pending. Article 9 begins some of the capital. This is some of the upgrades, and this is out of golf retained earnings. Bayberry Hills maintenance facility upgrades, garage doors, new equipment lift, and everything is explained there. The next one would be the water department retained earnings. In terms of the enterprise fund, and all the capital is there. These are similar to the other capital, and some of them are a continuation of capital that they do. The water meters is a regular item to replace meters in people's households, and then well redevelopment, things like that.
So let's pause it right there, because we did just kind of go through a bunch. Again, understanding that if Bob's organized these based on kind of other funds, but the numbers presented in front of us are the same as what we've already, seen. That makes sense, but I do want to pause and ask committee members if there are questions on these articles up until up through 10.
Yeah, and 10 is I think the one before this begins the capital. So the ones you saw 1 through I forget what is it, 9 possibly, were the budget items, both levy and enterprise and other funds. We're beginning, I think, capital begins a 9 from other funds. And so you see 9 and 10. So anything now is going to be capital, and then after that are the other articles, like ordinances and things like that. So it's a good grouping, I think, this system, because people are then getting used to the rhythm of the.
Okay, so for the committee on the budget articles 1 through 8, questions for Bill? Hearing none. All right, on the capital items, which would be what, 9?
Yeah, and I think it continues on to, there is one capital item using free cash, and I'm just going to go through those really quickly, but.
Yeah, what I'm going to go through each of these, and just, if you can,
Right.
again, just identify, these
Yes.
look like ones that we've seen on the capital plan, but if you, and also, ask Bob to, Robert to speak up if, there's anything he wants to add as the designee to the capital budget committee.
Yeah, these were in the plan and we pulled them up, but the first ones are from other funds. They're not the free cash or the levy. So 9 is golf, 10 is water. And you'll remember, Bob, at Capital, we had a mower split between water and DPW, and they're trying to figure out if that belongs in here. It made it above the yellow line, but it's not showing up here. It's something we might have to add. It's about $70,000 each of the water and DPW split it.
And is that,
It
None of
shows up
those are
on-
related to actual wastewater though, right? Aside from, the
No,
digging
this
up.
is water department, yeah, so it's not wastewater. You'll
Wastewater.
see a
Okay.
wastewater one later.
And I do note that on the earlier version, the amount total requested was 655,000. Now it's over $1 million. Is that reflective of the split or something else?
No, I think there were a few items added. I think what the advantage of doing the language this early, department heads are saying, oh, we need to add that. And it's happening now. I mean, when I first came here, Bob Lawton and I put together a special town meeting warrant, and we were getting things in, just before the printing. Now we'll have plenty of time to make sure we catch these and we have accurate amounts before we're, in that position. And again, this is great in a sense that you just saw most of these things. So seeing them in warrant articles allows you to write the report to the warrant that much sooner. Moving to Article 11, this would be borrowing of 3.8 million for the replace of a water main on a portion of Route 6A. In the capital plan, we separated out items that would be in the levy from items that would be from these other funds. And while they were, I believe they were rated, they weren't rated with the levy fund. So things like this, we're moving ahead, and a lot of this has to do with this is one of the oldest mains in the town going back to the 1930s. So both volume and age are the two reasons for this replacement. Fire department, they use their fire receipts reserved for appropriation from their ambulance fund. And they have indicated where their capital work. And to their credit, mobile portable radios, they have a grant for 176,000. Life pack monitors, 197. They have about 373,000 from other funds that's helping move ahead with the items above. And they also made an arrangement with the, I believe, finance to actually out of these funds pay back funds for the ambulance. So that's in this request. And here are the ones out of free cash. And if you remember in the CIP, we had a blue line and a yellow line. And the blue line represented $1.5 million, no adjustments to the line items. But the yellow line represented if you leased and you push some things into the budget, you could move the line down, that 1.5 million down. So the leasing is in the budget, in here, and you can see the cruiser leases at 88,000. Well, originally, if bought with cash, that would have been 406,000. So this allows us to capture a lot more in CIP because we're not laying out 400,000 in this given year. So I believe Bob has been able to get a number of 88,000 for the same amount of cruisers for lease.
Bill,
so go ahead.
Where's the Board of Selectmen on leasing? I know historically there had been some sort of policy or philosophical opposition to managing it that way. Have they changed their position on it?
I think Bob Sivara, you may want to comment on this because it came up at CBC that there was a distaste for a leasing if we had the cash kind of thing. I don't know if Bob can comment on that. Yes, I have heard that, but
Stephanie's question was about the selectmen's opinion.
Well, I know, but I mean,
we didn't hear anything from our level.
All right, I had heard it filtered down to CBC about what they liked and disliked, but because when we mentioned the leasing, that kind of dialogue came up. But this is such a reoccurring expense, and it's not like you're going to be leasing beyond the life of the equipment, So what it does is allows you not to have to lay out all that capital, and it allows you to go further down in the list to what we refer to as the yellow line and capture a lot more. Now, Bob saw the need to move further down the list and get, some of these items in this year while he had some of the free cash. So this is pretty much sequential with what the CIP committee had done. I think he just took the spreadsheet verbatim, but some of them went a little further.
I have a question on leasing.
Sure.
Do we have a written commitment on that, or is that just a budget number right now?
I
For
think that's a budget
88.
number. Yeah, I don't think it's a written commitment, but I will check with Bob on that.
Yeah.
We obviously probably wouldn't do it until we get through town meeting to get it funded. So
Yeah,
it's
but I
probably
mean,
a number for town meeting.
yeah, if we had to pay, if we had some kind of a thing that said, okay, for 180 days, we'll honor this number or something, so that
Yeah.
it doesn't all of a sudden grow.
Yeah, I
Madam
mean, if it's gonna go up, I'm familiar with it because in some of the towns I work, we lease cruisers and they basically give you a lock-in date for town meeting and then you lose it if you don't get it at town meeting. You can't, you don't have that number, but I will find out if the lease number is locked.
Robert, did you want to add something?
Yeah, the chief did have a quote. We saw it, but nobody would hold that quote, given COVID and what's been going on, unless he was going to order it at that time. So, yeah, this is the number the chief has.
Yeah,
Under the same risk as all our other numbers, that when you actually go to buy it, it's different costs. It can happen, especially this year.
Yeah.
and Robert has a good point. To the irony is, we're getting these approvals in April and effectively maybe a month later, you've got everything together to be able to order, but July 1 is your fiscal year. So you're really buying in July. So it's tough
Nate,
to.
I just want to ask Nate, does that answer your question?
Yeah, for right now it does, yes.
Okay. If I may, I bring that up just because I do want to flag for the committee that, it is a somewhat different approach that the town has taken. I will say personally for me, I think that leasing makes a ton of sense. And I was not a huge fan of the previous policy. But that being said, I think that it's only fair to just make sure everybody's informed of that as we go forward. And I would just be curious if anyone, has any thoughts contrary to that. It would just be helpful to see kind of where the committee is on that.
Yeah, I think leasing is just another financing tool. It really comes down to what is the value of the residual at the end of the contract. And so it's all about negotiation. A lease is just a loan. The ownership is different, obviously, but if the lessor is willing to, at least in municipal leasing, recognize that there are certain advantages here to them and give some of those to us in the negotiation, then it makes sense to do it. But it's, again, it should be paired against direct borrowing. Maybe that becomes a problem in small dollar items, but I've raised this several times. I don't see us ever talking about bank qualified loans. And those are designed for small municipalities. That's the whole purpose of that statute. So I think it would be comparing what our debt service is under one structure as opposed to another. But I leave that to our finance department to tell us which of those is the better deal for the town.
Okay. Anyone else have any thoughts on that? Okay, hearing none. Let's continue with the capital. Another question that I have is just, so we're getting further down. Are we getting down to, I don't remember if it was the blue line or the orange line or the chartreuse line, but are we getting down to that second line or somewhere in the middle?
Let me call that up for you. Can you see the CIP now?
Yes.
All right. So again, the CIP set up a system, the capital budget committee, that basically said if you make some changes to everything above this blue line and then some below, like leasing and things like that, you can, with 1.5 million, reach here. I think Bob went a little further down the line and grabbed a few other things. There was one thing that the library feasibility study, I think, was grabbed and brought into the CIP. So in terms of some of the things you see, this one right here, the roadside mower should have been split. We're only seeing it from water, as I mentioned, in their capital, and not seeing it show up there. So we have to go back to them and ask for the, you know, the split to happen. That is, water shows up with 69,500 and DPW with 69,500. And then the CIP had the trailer, the shooting trailer at 25% free cash, 25% levy, and 50% donations. I think that's a little bit different here, but we might make the correction there if, you know, the other one is possible. So in the budget itself, you can see it pretty much tracks the way the CIP did it in terms of these follow some of the CIP rating items, with the ones that were brought up that may have not been voted. Well, OPB trust and other things were not in CIP. The comprehensive plan update was not in the CIP. And then grant match for coastal, the booths were, cable television expenses was not. Library feasibility study, that's the one that was below the line that is in this. And the intent there is just to start that process and determine, you know, the scale and scope of the project. So everything else pretty much tracks the way the CIP was in terms of the sequence. And then the rest of these, again, this is a list of things that are going to be coming out of free cash and not necessarily CIP, but it tracks pretty much the way the CIP was, except for the bottom, which are free cash requests that had not gone to CIP from here on down, I believe. Well, roadway improvements did, but that's another funding source that's available. Any questions on this?
So I have a question. Can you go back? You mentioned the shooting trailer and the plan for splitting that up. So can you
Yeah, it just doesn't
refresh my
show.
memory on that?
Yeah, that doesn't show that. So I'll talk to Bob about that, whether or not it's its full amount. This looks like half of it. So I think the CIP said 25% levy, 25%. So this would be an accurate interpretation if you take it all out of free cash and not necessarily hit the levy. There are more, and correct me if I'm wrong, Bob, they're more interested in seeing 50% donations than worrying about 25% free cash and levy, you know, each. So it could be 50% levy, free cash, and 50% donations, and that was what this would be. I think is about 50% of the project.
Yeah, the bottom line, I think, is how much is the total amount that the taxpayers are being asked to pay. So do you know what is that 319 or is that a larger figure?
319 is out of free cash. I do not see it showing up as a separate article. CIP shows it as a total firearm shooting trailer at 638,000. So the 319 would be the split, right around there. So the CIP committee had that amount to fund, because what this amount would be is out of levy. The other amount would be out of free cash. with the match, 50% match, and that's included in the text. I believe the shooting trailer. Yeah, recommended 25% be levy, 25 free cash, and 50% donation. So what I think Bob has done here is this looks like 50% and it's out of free cash. So we're assuming the other 50% is donations by the time we get to town meeting.
So this is, I think, just the question that I know previously the finance committee had asked about this is just some degree of assurance that, you know, should the figures change on this, that that we wouldn't be coming back for another article and more funding at a later point. Do you feel like we're there?
I think that it's sort of a prefab type of arrangement. So the costs are, you know, except for going to ground, which, you know, in the Cape in terms of sand and foundations, it's not that difficult. So I think the costs are based on a prefab, you know, building, actually almost like a Connex box that comes in. So it's not like that they're building a building and the concrete walls and everything else, the HVAC system, they're ordering the parts and putting it together essentially. So there's a greater possibility that, you know, the costs are accurate now. But again, it might be that if there's an overrun, it comes out of donations, and this is the number that gets voted at town meeting.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was one of the questions that I had been asking the police department, and the response that I got was that, you know, if there are not any other plans, you know, if the amount that they needed, the 50% that they needed, there's not any other plans for future stages, and unless the police foundation comes up with other large donors, and they would be looking for other grants, but other than that, there wouldn't be really any other kind of contingency plans. So I think, again, just looking historically at what the perspective of the committee has been on this is just sort of, you know, ensuring that what we're presenting to town meeting is, you know, reflective of the totality of the project, you know, given the different phases that have been involved and various costs.
Yeah, I think that what you could probably do is where you have donations and other things, basically set a policy. I know that when I've done capital like this before, the policy is that if there are cost overruns, it comes out of the other funds. So you can't often do that with grants because they're stuck with giving you an award. But, you know, in this case, if there's donations, any overruns come out of there and not necessarily, you know, town funds. And that's one way to approach it. That way, you know that this number is this number. Again,
How would such a policy come about?
Well, I mean, I don't know if that's a policy they would set at finance. Typically, something like this, if you're, you know, $4,000 over or $2,000 over, and it's not a lot of money, they find it in the budget and then move it forward.
Sure.
But, and that's probably the best way to do it. The difficulty now is with the pandemic and supply chain issues, we're putting these numbers in here, you know, in February, and we're spending this money in July. So that sort of lag time, anything can happen. So an overall policy on how you deal with that, you know, I think one time we had a 10% rule that is, if it goes over 10%, you got to find some other money or bring it back. You know, so, and the 10% rule is kind of standard to the extent that it is a sufficient change to not be the same request in some cases. But I mean, I think this one is pretty solid, this cost estimate. I've seen some of the material on it, and they don't generally it's parts, it's a kit almost.
Okay.
Uh,
Sorry, go ahead.
Roadside mower is the one that I was talking.
Well, let me
about.
just ask, are there any other questions from the committee on
No.
the trailer? Because I know this has been something we've discussed in depth. No. Okay, please continue.
Roadside mower, this is the one that should have been split with water. It should have shown up in the water. I've sent an email in that regard. So this is DPW water highway. This is not the full amount. This is the amount that would come from DPW. Everything else is pretty straightforward. Some of the discussions we had at CIP regarding these items is some of them need to be in the budget, but if you were to put these in the budget, you might have a levy problem. So free cash gives them the opportunity to get these projects done.
Bill, can you just refresh my memory on what the Long Pond study is?
Oh, that is related to invasive species, I think.
Okay,
It's necessary. It's sort of eutrophication and to prevent, determining what the issues are. There are culverts and other things, outlets that need to be checked as it relates to whether or not the water is migrating through well enough and whether or not there's invasive species. So
okay, so not phosphorus or nitrogen related.
aware of, I can see if I pick it up here. Crucial to understand environmental impacts and mitigation measures for open space and natural resource. That's a generic kind of. One of the things we mentioned is CPA funds. Could they be used, in this type of analysis?
Robert, do you have any memory about a little bit more about that?
Only it's been on for years, never made the cut, so it hasn't got a lot of attention. But I think Bill's right that it's about water quality in the Long Pond study.
Okay,
That's what I remember.
thank you.
All right. And as I explained, some of these were not in the CIP. Some of them were the roadway improvements. And I believe this is an amount that is allocated to those roadway improvements based on an override potentially. I'm still learning that. And then the rest of it is really, this is a list of everything taken out of free cash. So, but the predominant amount on the list is capital work, which is, as I said before, sequenced pretty much with the capital improvements plan.
And a question on the OPEB. Just want to make sure that I'm understanding that this is two different things. The free cash going to the trust fund versus the OPEB contribution that we have seen in various departments' budgets over the past couple of weeks. Those are two different things, right?
Correct. And I think they'll show up in their budget still, or they would have up in the top part. And we can, if we have time, I can go back and look at those. See if
It's okay. Just but generally the trust fund is just an extra payment, because I know last year we either skipped a payment or we paid less than we should have for our schedule. Anything that you might know about that, again, you could come back to us on it, but I would just want to get a little bit more.
I'll check it out in terms of if it's the full OPEB or it represents something separate from it.
Or if it, yeah, or if it's paying off a little bit more, because I suspect that's what it is, because we didn't pay, I'm almost positive we didn't pay the full amount that we had on our schedule last year or the year before due to the pandemic and uncertainty about collections. So if we're making that up, I think it's terrific, but it's just great to be sure of that as we go into the town meeting.
I'll find out. Article 14 is the purchase of a scale. Now, these funds are set aside by Covanta, the contractor, since the beginning of the lease period. And they are putting up an additional scale at the site to create more safety and efficiency, and also communications device so people don't have to walk up some stairs apparently and avoid foot traffic going around the vehicles. So these are funds that are already set aside and the work is commensurate with the amount of funds essentially. Covanta is the one that'll be installing it with the town. So it's at the transfer station. This is a recreation revolving fund that we talked about, and this recreation revolving fund allows recreation to push fees and revenues into a revolving fund, then pay part-time staff and program people in terms of consultants and things like that. And at the end of the fiscal year, anything above $10,000 goes back to the general fund. So the distinct advantage here is the ability to run programming. And so if you were oversubscribed in a particular program and you had a lot of participants, you're only budgeted for X under, the current system. So you only can have that size. Or if you decide that you want to start a program, you really can't do that now. With the revolving fund, you can start a program, take the revenue in, push the revenue back out to the staff and the teachers, as it were, so this allows that flexibility that we talked about with Amy Howell Recreation. This is collective bargaining wage adjustments, and I think they're still waiting for some of the numbers on this. This is the Wastewater Stabilization Fund, and I think this one more about than I do, Stephanie. It is the ability to take revenue from wastewater fees associated with, I think, dedicate the Municipal Modernization Act of 2016 allowed the town to accept and dedicate no less than 25% of a fee or charge or other receipt to a stabilization fund. This, I think, takes the hotel revenue and puts it there. Our concern is as we move forward with the wastewater, we want to be able to create the columns and solidify them and lock them up. So there's the WIF, there's other programs. So this is one way of doing it, taking the short-term rental and putting in a stabilization fund that we would then apply to the wastewater project.
Yeah, and I can just jump on that and say, the committee had previously discussed this last year as we were going into the budget process, that, and there was talk of, potentially using some short-term rental funds to potentially fill a hole in the budget, and just some concerns about that becoming a habit. This, to harken back to Al Gore running for president, this is like puts some of that money in a lockbox and makes it so that it can't be used for just sort of filling holes in the budget. And it creates an amount of certainty that what comes in is going to be used for the purposes of wastewater and nothing else. And I think that is just, something that's helpful for the long term, and the tricky piece of it is that the way that the state set up the short-term rental tax law is that it just dumps all the money collected from that into your line item for your rooms tax. So you can't separate the two out and say, we just want to do this just for rooms tax. So you kind of have to do some math, which I take it that Ed has done, and determine, okay, of the total amount that we're getting in rooms tax, approximately what percentage is short-term rental. And then we're saying, okay, that's 75% in this case, or, we want to put 75%, some of it could be room, just, hotel, motel, but generally that is a way to ensure that, the significant funds that are coming in from short-term rentals are going and being immediately kind of siphoned off, and there's no temptation to tap that at a time of economic uncertainty, which allows for town departments and others to kind of plan for the future as it relates to wastewater.
Is there any way that it doesn't have to be in the warrant every year, that it can just be a recurring charge, a recurring?
That actually does this. So it's adopting a state statute
Okay,
that is a local option. And so once we do that, automatically every year, 75% of whatever we collect will go into that kitty.
Okay.
And then anything that we would want to take out of it
Yeah.
would then need to be voted on town meeting. Correct me if I'm wrong, Bill.
No, you're
So,
right.
okay, so we would have, next year, we won't have this article then because it'll be locked in.
Correct. And it is, as Stephanie said, it takes it out of the stream before it has to be authorized at town meeting and goes into wastewater. And as I said, we have several columns. I'm sure everybody's heard the way wastewater is being looked at in terms of refunded. And what we're doing in this article, you saw an enterprise article in fall town meeting. This article is locking up this funding source to be regularly deposited. So it's available for wastewater. Another article later I'll show you is the Diff. It's setting up that revenue stream. So we're trying to lock up all those columns officially and finally, so that when we do go for the ask for wastewater, they are true revenue streams and not something we have to go back to town meeting for every year.
Thank you.
You're welcome. This one is basically taking the tourism revenue fund, and Bob will have to answer this one. He had just started working with the CEDC on this, and it basically amends some of the tourism revenue fund to move more of that money into the wastewater effort rather than have it generally applied. And I'm gonna skip that because the way it works is, apparently town council said you have to divide the programs up into set amounts: administration, special events, marketing, public improvements, economic development, unallocated, things like that. And what we want to do is make sure a good amount of this money goes to the wastewater effort, while still leaving some on the table to continue the economic development efforts. So that's still in process, but it is funding of overseen by community economic development, used to stimulate tourism. I think the explanation up at the top, through this article, the town seeks to reserve the short-term rental without impacting residential taxpayers. So again, this is similar to stabilization, but it's for a different revenue source. So you can see. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just saying, Bill, when you talk to Bob, would you just ask him what the position of the Chamber of Commerce is?
Yeah, we will. I think Mary was at a meeting last night for CEDC, then he brought it into the board. So obviously there's going to be some back and forth, there possibly will with this, but the goal again is to get back to that. If you look at all those columns we've had in the sort of budget to pay for wastewater, there were revenue streams that, were there, but weren't really locked in as being directly related to wastewater. So the stabilization one, this one, and the Diff one I'll show you later are all part of that effort to say, before we go in and ask for money, we want to make sure that we don't have to ask for money every single year to pay a note.
Yeah, makes sense generally. I would just want to know, just to confirm where the chamber is on that.
Sure. Next one is Diff. I've done this before. I've done two of them. I was fortunate when I worked in Amesbury that we were part of a pilot program to help write the Diff guidelines for the state. So Diff is District Improvement Financing. And what it does is it takes new growth from a point in time. So what you do is you fix the values at a point in time with what's called an investment revenue district. And by fixing the values, the growth thereafter goes to pay off a note or goes to the project. And what I've done in the past is that percentage that you take out of that growth is variable to basically create a fixed amount. And so in Amesbury, we fixed it at 250,000 a year. So your first year might have been 100% that you were taken out of that new growth, but 10 years later, you might be down to 15 because the growth is continuing to occur, but you still just need 250. So right now, all we're asking for is to set the district itself and to set the properties associated with those. And then the last thing is to fix their value. Values are fixed in January of the year that you're in. And in this case, that's what we're doing is setting the base values and the districts. There are two types of districts, is an invested revenue district and then a development district. The invested revenue district is the one that collects the money. The development district is the one where you spend the money. Sometimes you can have two different ones. In this case, we are encompassing all of phase one sewer, where the sewer is going to go to both collect and spend the money. It's important to make sure that you get those districts correct. I've seen people do these things and forget, oh my God, we have to do that bridge down the street and it's not in a development district, so we can't spend money on it. So we decided the best thing to do is there was a prior effort on this, a diff. It had some good points, but it wasn't the whole project. As a result, when you don't have the whole project and you want to pay off a note, you have to proportionally segregate out what the note is paying for in the district. So that's what this is. It's sort of correcting some of the issues we saw in the prior attempt and encompassing the whole project. So I'll show you quickly the South Hunt diff, and I won't belabor this too much, but this is basically the document that represents a diff, and then so you establish the areas, you establish the amount of value. Going down to the bottom, in the back, you have all of the properties that are in that. You show the total value, the parcel levy, if there's any TIF, and whether it's going to be acquired, if is it in the invested revenue district. So, and then you have a map. So this is the map of the Amesbury example. So we're going to create this type of report to move forward. And the great thing about these reports and the system that the state set up, let me stop at the flow chart. Oh, here's what you would call a development program. This allocates funding to specific improvements that are on the left, the funding in columns, and you can see how the diff is capturing some of that funding. And then last thing, this is a diff schedule. So you can see we had 240,102 as our need based on our capital plan. And the first year, we didn't need all of it. We needed soft costs, but it was 100% of our projected growth. And you can see the percentage declines, but that's the amount of money we needed to make our project work total. And these were payments. So the great thing about the diff is you can change a percentage based on the schedule. So a lot of people look at these and they say, oh, you got to fix the dollars. And what do you do with the extra revenue? You don't have to. You can fix on a dollar amount that you want to earn and change a percentage per schedule. So this is a great tool, and it's really taken off in some communities since they did the guidelines and the applications and everything else a lot better. And you can see how we use the diff to leverage MassWorks grants also, which is here. So that's the important part of the diff. You're getting new growth cash to go get somebody else's. Any
So
questions?
you're going to be
on that?
doing something like this for Yarmouth ahead of town meeting?
Yeah, so I will have this done, this type of report done for Yarmouth, but this is the second report. So the first report is the one, these are our projects that we had in narrative. We might have this done moving forward. The first report is just where are we going to collect the revenue, where are we going to spend the revenue, and what parcels. And then there's a brief description of the program. The next one is going to be this report. This is the full report with the development program. So you can see I was really fortunate there. I had some projects that were going to ground already that were worth $67 million. So I had 3 projects that could pay for the whole diff. So part of the diff exercise is set the values, set the location. Then between now and the next town meeting, work with developers to try to get definitive projects that show that you will have the increased value. And these are estimated values of increase over the property value. The advantage of a diff is you don't touch the base. So whatever you're getting in taxes now doesn't change. And there is a standard, if not for the diff clause, which says, if not for the diff, you can't afford the sewer, therefore you can't do the growth, therefore there's no new growth. So when people say you're taking away the new growth, it's not entirely true, because it wouldn't happen without the diff paying for the sewer that creates a new growth. And as you see by the schedule, it's most likely we won't be using all of the money. I mean, obviously we want to leave some new growth on the table. This is the formal method to capture new growth, and the advantage of it, and that's the center, is a 500,000 square foot athletic facility, 6 hockey rinks. But that's a center that funded this thing. So the diff is something that was entertained by town meeting 2019. I think it received acceptance. All we're trying to do is formalize it and capture the entire area. So we'll have this for town meeting, the same report.
And
Any
Bill, real
questions?
quick, the difference between a diff and a TIF.
So a TIF is, I've done like 6 of those. A TIF is a tax consideration to a developer relating to their new increment. And so we provided that center, you saw a TIF, and what it meant was if we were getting a half of, or I think it was, we were getting 200,000 in taxes as a vacant site, and we were going to get 13 million over the same, over the same period. It was either 1 million over 20 years, or I think it was 15. We take some of the new growth and we provide it, and we reduce the taxes for the developer. And the advantage is it's, again, the if not for clause that we go to that. This thing is sitting up on top of a really steep hill with a long roadway and a lot of site cost. We basically took the TIF to lower their taxes to provide, amortize their site costs. If not for the TIF, they wouldn't be able to do the project. Then we took the diff and about 4.5 million in MassWorks grants to lower their offsite costs. So for that, in our TIF agreement, we basically said, we want to see the 220 room hotel come right after that. And that's the agreement. If they don't have the 220 room hotel showing up right after that, then the diff starts declining a lot faster in their last 5 years. So there's some good negotiations you're going to do with this. The great thing about TIFs is I always put in a sort of a local labor clause, and we have a job pool or a job fair, and a hotel I did one for, 14 of the employees were all Amesbury residents. So there's a lot of good that can come out of them. And the key to it is, if we didn't give these people a TIF and didn't do some of the offsite, that they wouldn't be doing it. Unfortunately, just as we're about to bang a hammer, pandemic hit. So they're still in pre-development loan stage and not in construction loans. They sort of staved off that until they, because hockey obviously is one of those pandemic hit type of, uses. So it's not really good to build a $75 million building with no tenants. All right.
So Bill, I think that I think it would be helpful ahead of town meeting to maybe get any more materials, background materials, again, kind of getting into how a diff works, some commonly asked questions ahead of going into town meeting. I recall that 2018, 2019 town meeting, there were a lot of questions. I suspect there will be a lot of questions again this year. So, as prepared as the committee can be for that, I think would be appreciated. Anyone else have
Yeah.
questions for Bill on the diff?
I just want to show you, this is the page that I left behind, that, to your point, Stephanie, it explains where the revenue is coming from in each of these projects. There is a program and budget, and there's a diff presentation. So we'll have all that. And again, as I said, it's, here's the common questions of a diff, if you can see that. So we'll have all that prior to town meeting. I'm almost done with the report. And the
Perfect,
difficult
thanks, Bill.
part is getting the data, so back to town meeting, that's the diff article. And again, you see a pattern here is budget, capital, and then articles associated with establishing revenue stream. So it's great that we're trying to do it this way, because as people are in town meeting, they can see the pattern of accomplishing objectives. The stabilization account, then this, then moving forward. Oh, this is the town seal committee, not really as much of a financial one. I think the board discussed whether or not they need this, and they would just appoint a committee. So this may or may not be in the final, but it's something to consider. The Historic Commission wanted to go over the town seal. The rest are CPA, and this is their reserves each year. And it's something that we'll be working on, is trying to get more of this push toward, some of our capital programs. As Bob remembers, we got about a lot of picnic tables, and maybe it's something that those kind of things go through here, because they're related to recreation programming. And there's an allocation that they normally do to the housing trust. And then there are various projects that they do. So there's no large Sandy Point $1.7 million in this year's allocation. And the projects are described. CPA open space is a regular dedication for that, engineering design for Friends of Bass River and watershed restoration. And the next one is, this is an interesting article, does have something to do with finance. We do not have any real clear category and zoning relating to short-term rentals. So what this does is establish that, and by virtue of that, have some clarity on the land use side, because short-term rentals, let's say a single family home rented for a week, sometimes involve people having parties and other things and then taking off. So this helps us sort of manage some of that. And this is a zoning article for short-term rentals. Moving forward, this is Article 27, an interesting article. There's a considerable amount of seasonal employees, and I've been working with the chamber on that, the partnership, Bob, and what's happened is in the past, seasonal employees were able to stay in homes in the community and create a relationship between the group that brought them here under visas and homes that want to, donate the opportunity to provide housing for seasonal employees. Except with COVID, nobody's really renting their homes. So, what this does is allow hotels and motels to provide housing for seasonal employees as a percentage of their total. So it's still something that is a problem, in large organizations. And I remember working in a resort, and remember this, you would bring an entire team, a kitchen, wait staff, and everything else up from Florida. And they would work in a particular resort venue. So that is also the type of housing, US citizens that are coming up as an entire culinary and service team, could be almost 100 people in some cases. Then there's the people that come in by visas, they're also there. So this is a real problem since COVID hit, because the stock of housing that used to be available in local homeowners is not there now. So they're trying to solve it with motels and things like that, providing the space in the motel.
And if I could just add to that, yes, COVID is certainly a factor, but this is, I think, more reflective of the overall housing shortage that even, year-round workers can't find a place to live, let alone H-2B visa workers or J-1 students. So I think this has been a long time coming. And even when the pandemic ends, there will be a need for this. So it makes sense to me, but we're not voting on it. So.
Yes, but it does have implications for the economy, so.
Yeah, if local
revenues.
businesses can't stay open because they don't have employees, that's going to be a problem for tax collection.
We just had a meeting on this and, moving forward and taking a look at the next steps through some chamber members. And you're right. I mean, people are saying that they'll might have to close on Mondays because they can't get enough staff and things like that. I mean,
Yeah, I've seen it all up and down the Cape, and you see it, you see it on days that should be high revenue days in the summer because of this problem. So it again goes back to the idea that housing is critical to our economy as well as our ability to fund the town. So I'll get off my housing soapbox though. I do that all day.
The next one is a
Madam Chair.
petition article I think.
Sorry, Robert, did you have something you wanted to say?
Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know, Bill, if you mentioned this or not, but aren't we like 200 to 300 beds short or something based on projections for next year?
Yeah, and Robert, to that point of the groups of people that come up from Florida, we've got about 120 or more of those.
Yeah.
Of those teams, and the irony is that those teams come up with their own management entity and everything else, so it's a perfect opportunity to find one site, and they're all organized and they're self-policing because they all work for one corporation. I experienced it. I worked at a resort on Lake Champlain, and a whole team would come up from Florida, and there was an executive chef that managed everybody, and they had staff meetings. So people look at these things as seasonal employees as just a whole bunch of people showing up, but no, there's definitive groups, and then people with visas are represented by an organization, and there's a very rigorous process for their housing. So it's something that has to be done because there isn't the available housing. And as you do, the irony is these two are together, the seasonal, the short-term rentals and this. Well, we have about 800 registered short-term rentals. And so if you take those 800 out of the picture to be available for seasonal housing, I mean, I talk to people and they say, as a college student, they used to live in a home right on Shore Drive, right close to work with 5 other students, and yes, there was partying, but now those houses are probably rented, at, I know one I'm in, when I leave, will be $1,500 a week. So there's a competition between short-term rentals and this type of housing. So what was available historically in the past isn't anymore. So now there has to be a definite.
Yeah, I get it. Thank you.
Yeah, and then so polystyrene, this is a petition article from the recycling committee. And this is to basically, I think, eliminate polystyrene. So, but you can read it. I don't know. I haven't read the entire thing. Not as much of a budget issue, but this is kind of typical. This one, because it stays in the environment forever, is typical of locations such as Yarmouth.
So I'm just curious. I would be curious to hear from the recycling committee, because there was an effort last year to do to ban plastic water bottles at local businesses, and that failed by a rather slim margin. So it's interesting that that folks aren't coming back with that proposal, but then going to take out materials and that sort of thing. Again, this would be a type of thing I'd be curious to know what the the Yarmouth Chamber of Commerce's position is on this, and the timeline. June 1, 2023 is not a ton of time. So I would definitely like a little bit more information on this. But others have thoughts or questions.
They might have their information on the website. So if I find something, I'll send you a link. They seem like a well-organized group in terms of public information. They did a presentation to the board recently.
I think my concern is, and I voted for the plastic water bottle ban, because that is something that there are alternatives available, and ultimately it ends up being the consumer that pays for the difference. This is a little bit different. This is part of the overall kind of, goes into your overhead as a restaurateur, et cetera. You're not necessarily always going to be able to raise your prices as much accordingly. So my only concern is just not having any data in terms of what this would mean to local businesses in a compressed period of time, when there's a lot of other kind of challenges that they're dealing with financially.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't see anything on the website that's in addition to this, but I'll find the background on it. Because as I said, I know they did a presentation to Board of Selectmen, which might have contained some of this. And last but not least is a petition article for a zoning amendment. Do you want to pick this one up, Bob? It does have economic development implications. Or should I? It is
You want me to talk about it?
Let me start it off for you, and then
Okay.
you can answer any questions.
Sure.
It is a site on Berry Ave. Can you hear me? Site on Berry Ave that is across from the gas station, across from the chamber, and then near and the Irish restaurant and near 99. The planning board did not bring this forward before, but this is a petition article to move it forward to make it residential, not residential, from residential to commercial, given it's surrounded by commercial. You can pick it up from there, Bob, if you wish.
Yeah, the explanation is that the corner lot, which is actually commercial, is a little less than an acre and very close to the light. So it's very hard to develop that lot, and that's one of the problems. We had Starbucks look at it, and even buying the lot next to it, they couldn't make it work with the planning and zoning board. The lot next door to it, they've been talking together, both owners. They're both in their 90s, and they'd like to sell and put these together. And the concepts, like you said, it shouldn't affect that many people. It's the exact same location directly across from the 99. So the rest of the corner is completely commercial. And this would help develop that lot, because the second lot is over an acre. So now you'd have a corner lot that was a little, almost 2 acres of land exactly. And this goes along, fortunately, with the idea of wastewater and how do we going to add sewer to our wastewater system. This would be a commercial property, so we generate more sewer, and would be, at a higher rate. We'd probably charge it for use of the wastewater system. So that's it. That's the explanation. I'm not actually looking for a vote or support.
So
I'll
Bob,
answer anything anyone's got.
is that the site right there? Can everybody see it? That's the site we're talking about, right?
It is.
All right.
Exactly. And that's the 99. Show them the 99 right there. This,
Yep. And
I
then
can't.
Celtic Kitchen,
Yep.
Speedway, and Chamber, and CVS, right?
Exactly.
And that wraps up let me get back to the sharing a screen.
So questions for Bill or Robert, on the overall warrant. Any follow-up information that we want to ask Bob for? Written hour.
And this is the shortest warrant I have ever seen, including the town of Orange, which had a low of 35. So,
Well, I think well, for annual, yeah, it is pretty short.
yeah, I mean, I think what Bob has tried to do here is by combining a lot of this capital, we're not seeing a whole bunch of, in this type of format, we're not seeing a whole bunch of different line items by departments. So in separate articles. So that I think is a good way of doing it. And then the sequence looks good because what it does is it groups like warrants with other warrants, articles, that is, in terms of budget, capital, wastewater, funding sources, and then moving on to CPA and the other items.
Robert, I see you have your hand raised.
Oh, Bill, can you tell us about
Yeah.
how the school vote, I mean, how the CIPC vote regarding the school recent request?
Yeah, I
Yes,
don't
back
have, I
the
have to
free
build
cash.
that spreadsheet. Let me see if I can find that for you.
I think I just want to explain that there could be, there's a whole request that came from the schools that's not built into that article yet.
That's capital or that's part
Capital,
of the operating
yes.
budget?
It's capital,
Don't they have
from free cash. Let's put
E and
that-
E and D that they can use for a lot of that?
If they choose
So there
to.
was some confusion during one of the meetings, and it was discovered that we needed to, that the way they're going to do it is similar to prior years, that they get approval for their capital. And then town funds them based on reimbursement, because at a CBC meeting, they were concerned about giving the schools money and then them spending it on something else or things like that. So this is the school capital. They were talking about, it is predominantly everything on the side over here. And I think that is everything. So pickup trucks, plows, and then there is a proportionate share for the DY issues, and that's shown here. And so we rated it. I just have to put the score totals together in terms of ratings. And there was a concern by the CBC to make sure that whatever we fund in capital, whatever we choose, and I need to blend these with the other capital programs. Make sure it's a reimbursement program like it has been in past years, so that if, let's say, they buy one pickup truck instead of two, that they're only getting $50,000 versus $100,000. There are other issues with this in terms of ownership of tennis courts and things like that, which are as much administrative, but that is the capital proposed by them. And correct me if I'm wrong, Bob, there was a concern about doing the roof replacement, that there's not a number there, but it was told it was 3 million, and work on ME Small when there's rumors that it will be replaced. Am I
Exactly.
right on that one? Yeah.
Yes.
So those are the issues for capital for the schools, not, except for that $3 million one on the roof, which we didn't get that in the price. There's not a lot there given the size. The school budget, you'll see on the 16th, they just voted it, and apparently it's favorable. So given other sources of funding and things like that. So we'll be getting that to you as soon as we can. We've scheduled them on the 16th, and we're trying to get the tech in on the same day.
Bill, will we also make sure that when they do their presentation on the budget, they're also presenting on this as well?
Yes, I can get them to do that. Their presentation might look different. I didn't want to, I'm sure that David Flynn has gone through multiple presentations.
Bill, you might want to turn off and turn back on your mic. It's giving an awful feedback.
All right. How's this?
Still bad.
No,
It's not just me hearing that, right?
No, I'm hearing it.
Okay.
It's garbled.
Something is stopped the share.
I mean, worst comes to worst, I guess you could call in
How's this?
audio. Much better.
It's better.
Great. All right. Shifting mic. So,
Perfect.
I don't know what it is. When I did a Teams meetings with the county, it messed up my mic and speakers, so. But in terms of the schools, while we'll get you the presentations, I have to wrap it up with David Flynn and get you the package so that you're ready for next Wednesday and try to get that for the tech also. So you'll have the school budget and I will begin to write your report. It'll be basically what you saw from some of the presentations, and given the warrant article, I think that we would basically take the budget and some of those other items, the fact that we have the warrant book and we can write the warrant report right now because you have the warrant language. So the board is going to, I think, meet on March 15th. And I think that's a meeting that they want to meet with capital and finance. So they have a hearing that they're scheduling, but I will get back to everybody. Our deadline is the 22nd of February, but it's not as solid given March 15th is going to be the hearing. So we'll try to.
Just a point of clarification on that. I had it in the schedule that was circulated previously that it was the first that was going to be that joint hearing.
They talked about it last, this is not a 3-night meeting week, Monday night. So I will double check it, but I had heard the 15th. So I will double check that. And it might be that they're hearing the school department on the 1st or something.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's possible that it was.
With your packet, you will get a updated schedule in terms of deliverable production and then the public meeting, and Bob will be going in with the CIP after I put them two together with Sandy, probably on the same night as the finance committee.
So that would be a joint meeting of capital budget, finance, and Board of Selectmen, is that correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Is that something that will be electronic or in person?
It'd be both capable. The board has hybrid, has been doing hybrid, and I think it will be a public hearing per the required statutes. So.
Okay, I will just ask, last year, there was some significant game of telephone played when it came to getting some clarity in terms of what the finance committee's role with that hearing was going to be. And I think, we can talk a little bit, maybe offline, you and I, but just making sure that we have some clarity about what the expectations of the finance committee would be at that meeting. What if anything, we should be reporting on, our role just sort of in general. I recall Brian and I both, kind of hearing one thing from town administration, this is before your time, and something
like
different from
everything
this.
else.
Yeah, so
4 months.
I just don't want to see a repeat of that, and I just
No,
want to
I
make sure
don't
that
either.
we walk in with some clarity about what it is the expectation is that we're supposed to be doing and questions we're supposed to be answering, et cetera.
Yeah, I think in that regard, Stephanie, let me show you something quickly. This is what we had set up for capital budget for the first presentation that we did with Sandy 5. So we'll try to do the same thing for the finance committee. Purpose of presentation, CBC role, like finance committee role, things like that, and your process and the options. So this is right out of the report. So we'll be doing that. And I'll be updating this for CIP so that it's not the preliminary discussion. And I'll be creating one for finance. And I think this is the easiest way to do it. We can do a short report and a good presentation and accomplish the same thing. And I think some
More
of the
than we
things
had
you want-
last year.
Yeah.
So sounds good already.
And I think that what you want to think about is inherent in your message that you gave at the fall town meeting is wastewater economic development. As I've gone through all these budgets, I see the message of more revenue, feeds, expanded our operations that brings us out of being, frozen in one state each year. So how much you as a group want to talk about economic development and the importance of commercial revenue to reduce the burden on residential taxpayers, that's up to you. But I think it's, from what you hear from departments, we're making do. You don't come out of making do unless you get new revenue. And you don't get new revenue if you're going to rely on every homeowner's pocketbook. So commercial and economic development, I think, is crucial. It was mentioned in your last report. Because there's some good tweaks in here, the revolving funds, and other things that were done. But the biggest issue is getting more revenue without hitting the homeowner as much. So I will.
Well, and the diff goes into that as well.
Yes, and the diff does that without hurting the homeowner, right? It's a direct relationship, but then the key to the diff is no commercial, no diff revenue, residential revenue. So we used to, in Salem, we would do fiscal impact analyses all the time when we would have developments come in to see the relationship between town services and, commercial. And invariably, every time we had 1,200 apartments come in a large development, and we had a lot more commercial. It was Tuscan Village. Thank God there was a balance, because if you don't have that balance of commercial and residential, you start losing money. Firefighters and police responding to residents, less so to retail. So I think that's some of the things I'll try to work up for you. And by your next meeting, I'll just do a quick intro, and then we'll have one more meeting to finalize the report. But as I said, this is what we did you can see the spreadsheets are there. These are the recommendations. What is capital? There was a concern that there's too much budget stuff in the capital. Create policies around where you take the money from so you're consistent. Go get grant money. Do better preparation for capital, and then vet them better. If you don't spend the money, I think this is a Bob thing. You should lose the money. Don't carry it over year after year after year with unfinished projects and consistent approaches. So I'll work on this for you before the hearing. We get out of screen share. And that'll be pretty much what you're gonna move forward with.
Questions for Bill about the report or anything else that we've reviewed at this point?
No.
I think, Bill, to your point about kind of the thematic messaging that has been in some of our recommendations, both throughout this budget process and in previous town meeting warrants, I would agree that making sure that we can grow the commercial tax base has, in order to offset the cost of everything to residential taxpayers, has been a key theme. I think one of the things that I personally have kind of been taking away has been keeping us a list of long-term goals that I'm seeing based on what I'm hearing from members and what I personally feel is important. And it's kind of falls into the buckets of identifying and growing revenue sources, and that includes commercial, adding taxpayers, again, that achieves that same goal. Identifying areas for investment, where we could end up ultimately, growing revenue. But also one of the things we talked about a lot the past few meetings has been around, savings through consolidation and economies of scale, most notably the police fire dispatch consolidation. There's nothing in the warrant articles that reflect that, but that might be something that we consider later on as a committee. That's of something that we would want to think about as kind of big picture goals. Again, I would like to get, once we get through the budget and town meeting, I think it might be worthwhile for this committee, depending on committee members' appetite for it, to not have like strategic planning or anything like that, but just to sit down and have a dedicated meeting where we don't have all these budget and town meeting pressures, to chart out what are some of our big picture long-term goals that we would like to tackle, similar to how Ken had his Shine a Light initiative. We can identify some of the ones that we would want to tackle over the next couple of years. Unless folks have strong feelings against that, I would suggest that everyone kind of be keeping a mental list or a written list somewhere, so that we can come back in the late spring or early summer and start to tackle those questions. Because I think, especially as we've heard from Bob Rittenauer, that the direction of kind of formalizing, cleaning up a lot of the budget that we're seeing, and what we've heard from Bill about putting more structures and clear expectations around what the committee can expect to see every year when it comes to both capital and budget, is going to ideally, I hope, free us up with a little bit more time and ability to look at some of those big picture things, as opposed to getting way into the weeds of how many vehicles are you leasing, or how many pencils are you buying, that type of thing. Not that we've been asking those questions more recently, but I think if we can kind of get back up to a 10,000 foot perspective, and look at some of the long-term trends that are going to be facing the town and the needs associated with that, we can start recommending some broader based kind of goals that maybe the select board and town administration might want to take a look at tackling over the next several years.
Yeah, I think that one of the things I want to do with the finance committee and the capital budget committee is to generate that definitive process and submittal requirements and anticipated outcomes, and develop policies around, certain expenditures come out of certain funds, and this is what we anticipate for a submittal to us in terms of revenues. And, as we said in CIP presentation, use somebody else's money. Before these things come in, there should be some sort of vetting saying, where else could you have gotten money for that?
Yeah.
So how much can you use the CPA, the CEDC, and other funds? I mean, in Salem, one of the keys was, finance committee used to tell me, is if you don't use any tax money, I don't care what you do. So
I've heard
it used to-
finance committee say that.
it was less, it wasn't as much that loose of a, but their message was, go get somebody else's money. So if you can come in at 50-50, we like you better than if you come in at 100% levy. So you would spend most of your time in between town meetings going and finding grant money, so that when you do arrive at the finance committee, I have this grant ready and I only need 25%. And I think that's what we should be preparing departments, because there is some money available out there. And so the best example is, we have about quite a few picnic tables for $20,000. Maybe there's a capital listing in CPA that can pay for some of those recreational assets. We're not going over to the levy or going into free cash for them. And that you see the list you see for free cash maybe is a list you see for those other funds. So like, we used to compare it to a gauntlet, that you go through the other people's money gauntlet, and then you get to come in and ask for levy money. So I think those are some of the recommendations we want to work on, and maybe even target as a finance committee some policies and say, we know there's CEDC money, we know there's CPA money, we know there's CDBG. We're gonna ask departments to come in and make sure they get a rejection from each of those venues before they ask for levy money. And
Yeah, I mean, I would add personally, I think we want to make sure that economic development money actually goes to economic development and things
Right.
that actually are going to grow the commercial tax base. That hasn't always been the case.
Right, and we have a request into the CEDC for 75,000. It's going to help write the rest of the DIF, the development program. It's going to put a retainer out there for a grant writer. Not a lot of money, probably 12 grand. And then it's also going to do a market strategy for 28. So Bob, you would be interested in this, is try to determine what the appropriate mix would be for land uses to increase the year-round business capacity and the tax revenue. That is, if we rely solely on tourism-related uses, we're relying for a partial year. And they're not always the best sort of paying uses. So in doing that, when I was in Salem, I did the fiscal impact analysis on Tuscan Village, and you determine what uses are going to cost you more than they are going to, make you. So part of the analysis will be, what do we want in the corridor that's going to make us money? And it's that simple, but also, how does it help the residents? And some of the things we're looking at as hypothesis is, can we get medical uses that pay taxes? How do we get medical office? Good
Right, that are
job.
not nonprofits,
Yeah, well,
not the hospital.
Partners is an entity that builds their own buildings now. I think they shifted, they used to use developers, but there are other medical communities out there that create consortiums, and a builder would come in and build it and lease it to them. That's what we want, obviously. But you have to work with a hospital that you're nearby. So, but if, let's say, that entity was nonprofit and we arranged a pilot that would pay for the wastewater, that's 30 years
Right.
of payment. And that's a great way of just funneling that money right in. The key thing is, if you do sort of a cost breakdown, taxes versus ripple effect, you get a good office like that with professional staff in it, and you're in the winter, those people are going to lunch to a restaurant that might have been closed, so you don't have that when it's sort of mono-economic and it's all tourists because the tourists aren't there. So you want to try to create an environment where you have a mix of uses, offices, housing, and retail, and service sectors, so that they're all feeding each other.
Well,
That's
there's
what you
also
need to do.
the question of where can you grow? We can't grow the tourism industry anymore.
No.
I don't think there's much room left for it. So it becomes a question of, well, what can you grow? And based on the high cost of housing, based on, the year-round, population and, skills and whatnot, there's a limited area where you can grow, but it is in the professional services field. And I would completely agree. I mean, back in the day, I worked for the Cape Cod Technology Council when we were trying to develop a silicon sandbar. We were really trying to advocate for, and we were doing a decent job of attracting tech, before the .com and tech bubble burst. But yeah, I think that thinking about that, it makes a ton of sense. Because we can't grow anymore when it comes to tourism. It's just not sustainable. Where are they going to go?
I mean, you can tell the marginal sites, and then when you start getting marginal sites in terms of hotels or motels that are in bad shape, it's Darwin's theory of, commercial land use is maybe there's too much of it. So we face that in Salem, obviously, when Kmart and other things closed and we had 8 million square feet of retail. You reach oversaturation despite the fact that you are tax-free at the state line. And then, so Tuscan Village was a land use mix that includes biotech residents. So by virtue of 1,200 residents, which they're going to feed into the retail and everything else that's there. So So you're bringing in customers, and those residents are paying $500,000 or more for their condos. So you just got to create the mix, and that's what we need to figure out on 28. What is the mix to sustains a good tax base year round? You know, when I was talking to the county about a grant, I said, this is what we want to do. A woman who is, you know, single parent, head of household and living in affordable housing, who may now say, we want, do you want fries with that? I want her to be able to say, the doctor will see you now. You know, I want her to have health care, and I want her to have a decent year-round job. That's where we want to be. Not that the you want fries with that is going to go away, but people who need to support families need better jobs. So that's really what the market study is going to be about, is trying to figure out the right land use mix before it becomes one thing. You know, so as that pipe goes down the street, you know, there are some probably properties there like, you know, Bob brought up, and others that are going to be ready. And so what is the best mix within the context of what our needs are? With 9,000 seniors in town, being in the middle of the Cape, adjacent to a hospital, medical looks like our best bet. Just got to position the tax whole thing correctly.
Yeah. And I mean, if it were at all possible to dovetail with that, you know, looking at the potential of the existing town hall site, you know, the school across the street that we've leased, that I don't know what is going on with Bridgewater.
Matikes has been in the lips of everybody in town.
Well, but the potential that there is for a campus and potentially even a village center right now where town hall is, and you know, whatever's going to happen with the future with the state police, if they're going to keep that location or go elsewhere. You know, I think thinking about that, it also goes back to kind of the idea of like, we don't really have a town center, which I think impacts our identity as a community. And if we were to have that there, or, you know, even Station Avenue, you know, there's ripe for kind of development and redevelopment there. And we could make sure that we had like a nice mix of, you know, mixed use. That I think there could be a lot of potential, not only for growing the tax base, but also for, you know, helping us as a community to kind of come together and co-locate things like the library study, the library, you know, where's the library going to go? I mean, again, I'll go back to what I said with the library director was presenting, like if it was housed in the same building as, you know, a number of other services, I think a lot more people the usage would go up across the board.
So I think that I will put together your report, but I think some of those issues with economic development, and I think from a finance committee perspective, begging the question, what is the appropriate balance to reduce the impact on the residents and provide them the services they need? That is asking that question to the extent that we go out and study it. What's the number? What is the mix? Because, you know, in Amesbury, we were at 11% commercial, and over 6 years, we doubled it. We went from 200 million to 180, add 185 million, almost double it. So the mayor's goal at the time was reduce areas of the budget to keep the taxes down, because they were extremely high in Amesbury. We were like in the 5th in the state. And then at the same time, create economic growth. So those two things helped us sort of climb out of the 5th place down to, I don't know, 35 or whatever. But those are the things I think that the finance committee, you know, can help with, is looking at the fact that, you know, this is not a cost problem. You know, you're talking to department heads and they're saying, well, if I only had this person or that person, it's probably not a cost problem, it's a revenue problem. So
yeah,
you know that you can't go to town meeting and ask the residents to open their pocketbooks every time. So how you express that in data and everything else is, I think, something we should do over next year, because it all leads to one thing, which is, understanding how economic growth, if you can go to town meeting and say, this diff is good for economic growth, which feeds a sewer system, but it also reduces your impact. What is that reduction? We went from 10% commercial to 20. What would the tax bill be for somebody? So,
Right. And it, like you said, it's the type of commercial that's also
Right.
really key. All right. Well, looking at the time, does anyone have any questions for Bill on, I feel like we got a little off the topic,
Yes.
but on any of this. It's just
does
as much me
anybody
as
want
as you,
to,
Bill.
does anybody want to do the minutes where I have those for you, where there were issues with some of them? Do you want to discuss them and maybe skip the ones that had issues? That's the list, and I have each of the set of minutes in front of you.
Yeah, I emailed Bill. I don't remember if I copied everyone else, but I had spotted errors in several of them. I don't remember which ones they were, but I could probably pull out which I think, yeah. The first set of minutes, the 27th, I would say let's take out, get those things fixed.
The 27th, mentioned something about the FinCom mission statement.
Yes, so so January 27th. It's under new business. The finance committee is working on an updated mission statement. I don't think that's the case. I think that was the budget either the budget statement for the warrant book or the annual report. But does anyone have any recollection of us working on a mission statement?
No.
Okay, so it's not my imagination. That's incorrect.
So that'd be budget statement.
Yeah.
All right. Or the warrant, the report, is that what it would have been? Why is it?
But then there was a question mark under the health department, the woman's name. This is Meredith Gilreath, question mark.
When I do this, I'll do it for the next meeting. What we'll do is we'll go up into the table of contents. I will list rather than actually going and changing them, I will list those issues. If anybody else sees any other issues, email me them. And so under each one of these line items, it would say, it will provide a motion to approve the minutes with the exception of, and then make notation of those issues. And then at your next meeting, I'll send this out. Your next meeting will be able to then just go off this sheet and say, pursuant to the list of minutes, approve all minutes with the exceptions as noted. And that way we
Yeah.
can. save
The other
time.
one that I saw a problem with was the 22nd. I
right.
emailed you that as well. But yeah, everywhere that it says in terms of who made the motion, Nate or Jack, Robert or Nate, we need to just clean that up. And I think Robert had said something like, if it's easier, just say me, I don't know if Robert still feels that way, but.
Some of these are.
I gave the scribe the thought that she probably heard two people say the second at the exact same time. So us picking one doesn't really change anything. That's probably the question.
So just I guess whoever's listed first, right, would probably be the easiest thing, and then just delete
Okay,
the second
All right.
person and the question mark.
all right. All right,
Okay.
so what I'll
So
do
we'll
is
have
I'll
that.
I'll get you the list for your next packet.
Okay.
And then, so as I said, we'll take the table of contents, add the comments under each date, and then you'll just make a motion as it relates to that list.
Sounds good to me. Any other comments or concerns on the minutes? Hearing none. Any old business? Any new business? Okay, barring nothing else, I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
I'll move to adjourn.
Motion to, I'll second. Thanks.
I was like, there's a little bit of a lag here. You guys, you want to keep talking for another 45 minutes? All right, all those in favor, Nate,
Aye.
Robert,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
I am an I as well. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Bill. I'll talk to you
Thanks,
tomorrow.
everybody. All right, see you.
Good night.